Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Craig Campobasso. First, I have a couple of announcements. If you would like to help us with the documentary production, anything would be extremely greatly appreciated. You can go to supportfkn.com. We have a PayPal link in the description. If you make a donation of $5 or more through supportfkn.com, you get access to Cory Hughes' secret JFK forum and tons of information that will be going into his upcoming book. This will be a huge undertaking. We're completely self-funded, so we could use your help. Like I said, anything would be greatly appreciated. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. That's the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. That's where you find some of your favorite podcasts from our community featured, like Raised by Giants, Legit Bat, What the Frick Live, Understanding Propaganda, Day Zero, and more. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Our social media is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and Rokfin is where you get our premium content. You also get all the premium content from every creator that is on Rokfin for only $10 a month. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+. That's ROKFIN.com/FKN+ to sign up now. Today I want to welcome back to the show Craig Campobasso. He is a multiple award-winning filmmaker and Emmy-nominated casting director. He was 15 when he started in the entertainment business. He directed, wrote, and produced the short film Stranger at the Pentagon, which was adapted from the popular UFO book authored by the late Dr. Frank E. Strangeness. Today we're going to be discussing his latest book, the UFO HotSpot Compendium. Craig, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm excellent, man. It's always great to talk with you. You're always busy with wonderful projects. I'm looking forward to getting into this new book, the UFO HotSpot Compendium. And you've been involved with ufology for a very long time. We always discuss your insights into the phenomenon when you come on. And I have to admit, my understanding of UFOs and ufology has dramatically changed, even probably since we last spoke. You know, that being said, it'll probably most likely change even more as time passes, and I keep gaining better understanding by sharing information with wonderful researchers like yourself. Now, there's a lot I want to get into, but first just remind the audience a little bit about yourself and what led you to write this particular book.
Well, I've been in the film business ever since I was 15, so I've always loved that part of it. And when I was 26 years old, I had a major spiritual awakening that sort of like made me look out into the universe where I'd never looked before. Never thought about extraterrestrials, never thought about that stuff. So I started doing deep dives into lots of books and going to lectures and UFO conferences and hearing stories from real contactees and meeting a lot of these people. And then I started going on investigations and seeing things and seeing craft and all of that. And I realized that if somebody wants to see something enough, if you put yourself out there, you will see it, right? So I literally have gone the gamut and have been doing all of this for well over 30 years. And I'm an author of 7 books. I have a 4-part book series called The Autobiography of an Extraterrestrial, Saga. And so that's what kind of got me into writing, and that was catapulted from my spiritual awakening and bringing in all the information that was really out there in the universe and connecting to all of those energies and outlining it in that book, especially talking about star seeds and how they raise younger worlds up into the universal society for those planetary beings to become fully conscious. So we're a dualistic race, of course, and so they've learned how to use their heart and mind as one. And so they work for service to humanity. And the rest of us, a lot of us down here work for service to self and other things. That's not so bad. Only when you do it in a very bad way that's going to harm other people as well. So it's really these incredible consciousness raising programs. Then my book agent came to me and said, I got a great idea for a book, the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. And that's the cover of it there. And I said, oh my God, I could totally write that book, because one of the things that I've always researched is all of the contactees who were especially having face-to-face contact with human extraterrestrials. And to me, that was so fascinating, especially a lot in the early 50s and 60s. So I knew a lot about those cases, and some were conversing with beings that didn't look like us, that maybe they were humanoid, but they might have had a look of an animal or something of that nature. Like the Yargans kind of resemble humans, but they also resemble seals in a way, because they have that kind of skin a little bit in their face. Of course, we all know about reptilians, grays, all of that, good and bad, just like in humans. And so I knew right where to go to all the source material. And so I was able to obtain permission from the publishers of these books to actually do a thumbnail review, because that's what the publisher wanted, of these specific races, right? And so the book did extremely well. It was released January 1st of last year, still going like gangbusters. And then they wanted me to write a new book, which is the UFO HotSpot Compendium, all the places to visit before you die or are abducted.
Now, I just have to ask you, when you say they wanted to, who is this your...
The publishers?
The publishers? And is there any specific reasons that they choose these particular topics? Is it something that the publisher is interested in particularly?
Well, there's three publishers. There's the big publisher, which is Red Wheel Weiser. There's the intermediate, which are book agents as well, but they also have their own thing, and they brokered a deal between MUFON and Red Wheel, right? So okay. MUFON has an imprint with Red Wheel, and I have two books with MUFON books. And then there's several other authors. I think there's a total now of 8 books with MUFON, some by J. Allen Hynek.
That makes sense.
Which they revamped. Kathleen Martin's book, Captured, has just been revamped. They have other books that are also very exciting. So they kind of come up with the ideas, and they brought it to me, and I said, wow, that's really great. So what they did was the head of MUFON sent out to all the MUFON state directors to nominate their favorite UFO hotspots, and which ones were the ones that garnered the most sightings and things like that. So I got a giant compilation, and we only focused on the US and Canada, right?
I'm sure that's plenty enough to focus on for a book.
That's totally enough to focus on for a book. And so I went through all of that and then compiled which ones I really, really wanted to focus on, mainly to do the larger story, because it was kind of like reopening each case to do a deeper dive into what the normal person would have no idea about certain places. So for instance, the first chapter is on Giant Rock and the Integratron. In the early days where George Van Tassel ran the Giant Rock Airport, right? And he moved out there because he wanted to have a more metaphysical lifestyle. So he took over from the former guy who had passed away, who was running the airport, who dynamited under Giant Rock and built his home underneath the rock. So there's actual pictures that I was able to get from the Integratron archives to put in there, and also worked with the historian of Giant Rock as well. And so you get to learn all about that, because a lot of people, I didn't know. I was just fascinating with that whole story because George began channeling extraterrestrial beings in the early 50s beneath Giant Rock. And I knew two people who were with him during that time. One just passed away a couple of years ago, and the other one is still alive. So I had real live witnesses who were there and who knew George throughout his entire lifetime. Then in 53, a craft landed in the middle of the night, and an extraterrestrial being named Salganda came out and met with George and said, "Would you like to see my ship?" Of course, George was fascinated with the way things flew because he had worked for Howard Hughes, Douglas Aircraft, and one other place before. And so he was very excited to go on the craft, and he describes what the inside of the craft looked like. Interestingly enough, in all of the archives and all of the on-air footage and things that he did, he never said in one sitting what Salganda looked like. So in listening to everything, one time he would say, yes, he was 5'6". His crew members were 5'6". And then another time he had short blonde hair. He had tan skin. He wore a silver uniform. So I took all the components and I had an artist create Salganda, because we don't have any artist impersonations of Salganda. And I put it in the book so people could see what possibly he could have looked like, which is kind of cool. So it was working with historians and also working with MUFON investigators, past and present, and also digging into Blue Book files of what we could get to say what was the actual outcome of that complete story. For instance, Alani Zamora story, where the policeman, he ends up seeing this thing go down, and he drives into the desert. He doesn't know what it is. There's a round sort of oval craft and these two little beings, and he gets closer and he realizes that they're not from here, and he totally flips out. Now, there were so many investigations that went into that, including J. Allen Hynek, etc., that the end conclusion was that nobody could prove or disprove what he saw. And so, but they all said that he was an earnest man and that they believed him, right? Not the Blue Book report, but J. Allen Hynek, all of the people who went and did a deep dumpster dive there. Now, I worked with two former MUFON guys who really went deep into this story recently and have put out a book that's on Amazon. So what's really great, what you guys are going to love about this book, is that at the end of each chapter, you will get the coordinates to exactly where that ship landed if you wanted to go to the site.
Yeah.
Right? In the Travis Walton story, you get the coordinates. In the George Adamski story, you get the coordinates to right where he met Orthon. There's the coordinates to where Valiant Thor's ship is stationed at Lake Mead. So you will get the coordinates, but you also we end with what was the final investigation, past and current, and then we go into the things when you're visiting the area, like the contact information, address, websites, phone numbers, all that good stuff. And I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. And then I do a really fun thing for the UFO tourist at the end of the book, where you can get all kinds of alien goodies, rent spaceships, all kinds of like strange things you would never think of. And then I end the book with all the conventions and festivals for UFOs, where to report a UFO, abduction and support groups, where to find current UFO info, reports and photographs and things of that nature. So that's what I love, is that you get to go and experience it. It's like taking a bucket list. I already had one fan holding the book up, and he sent me a video, and he's like, dude, I'm going to every one of these places and I'm going to post it on Instagram. And I'm like, that is so amazing. Yeah. You know, that is like so amazing. So there's 35 places, and you get to see what you can do. And, you know, even in the Betty and Barney Hill case, there's the coordinates to actually where the craft landed and all of that. But things that I didn't even know that would interest me is, if you were there and visiting, you could go to the local university and see Betty's dress that she wore. She donated everything to the university. They have the bust of Junior there that she had made, who is the leader, right? He looked different than the regular gray looking guys that were on the craft. He had sort of gecko eyes. He had blue skin that had an aluminum tint, and it was bumpy. And so Betty really, really liked this leader as well. So you get all those stories, and you get photographs, and all of the excitement that goes along with it. It's like you could take your own bucket list trip if you wanted.
Right. And were you able to interview direct witnesses from each of the areas that you explored? Not necessarily, professional investigators or anything, but just regular people who had seen sightings?
Well, one of those people is me. And the first one is when I was in Sedona. I always take night vision binoculars. I always see craft with that because it's way up high. And if you're in Sedona, I also give you the local people who will take you out on tours with night vision binoculars, right? You could go to the Bradshaw Ranch. You could go to a viewing point. The person I have in the book has 6 night vision binoculars, so you can go out in groups, and each person has their own. But also, once I was traveling towards Bell Rock, going to Bell Rock, and coming from Bell Rock was a giant metallic orb this big, and it was going like this, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm driving, I fumbled for my phone, and I snapped a few pictures, and I got it.
Nice.
So it's actually in the book as well. And yes, one of the witnesses from Giant Rock in the early days, I have asked her millions of questions over all the years and all the things, and she was really good friends with George. And the Bradshaw Ranch, for instance, I have heard of this place. It's in the Verde Valley. It's outside of Sedona. And Bob Bradshaw was a cowboy. And way in the early days, he bought 140 acres of land in the middle of nowhere. And there was a little homesteaded house on that property, said to be the oldest home in Sedona. right?
Hmm.
And so he built his ranch, his home there. And when his boys were young, they used to take people out and they would give them tours of the brush and all that kind of stuff. And then later in life, when he remarried his wife Linda, and her son moved into the ranch. Her son was in his 20s. Um, and my friend was working at the ranch at that time, and they were just starting to do shows like rodeo shows, cowboy shows, shoot 'em up, all kinds of different things like that. And my friend worked there, and I have heard her stories for all these years. And she said, with the first night we did a covered wagon rodeo show, she said a flying saucer flew right over us, like low.
Wow.
And she said it was like so amazing. And she said the energy there was so different that you didn't want to be there at night. She said, I made sure I always left so I would have enough time to get out of there before nighttime. Right. So I'm going to just give you a little laundry list of the things that happen at the Bradshaw
Yeah.
Ranch.
Well, this is
Now,
one of the craziest UFO locations ever.
it is. Now, I worked with local researcher Tom Dongo, who has a wonderful book out about it. Oh, that's what I was saying. So at the end of each chapter, like, I tell you the name of Tom Dongo's book in case you want to get it, right?
Hmm.
I tell you the name of all the research material at the end of each chapter under sources. And like even the Pascagoula incident, all of those things, you get the actual name of the book. So if you're really fascinated in that story, you can go online and you can buy it and read more about that story. But so the Bradshaw Ranch, the laundry list is this: a spaceship landed in broad daylight in front of the ranch. Another time at night, Greys were wandering around the property, looking in the windows, and they saw them, right? Another time, their dogs were barking at something outside repeatedly and crazily, and they went outside and they were barking, looking up at something, had it surrounded. And when they got outside, all they heard was really loud, horrific hissing, and it freaked them out. So they got the dogs inside, and the next morning when they went outside, they found reptilian footprints where they were. Right? So evidently it was close. Now, you have to realize Sedona is a giant vortex. There is quartz crystal embedded in everything there. And when this quartz works alongside of with this red rock, right, and it has like a lot of iron ore and things in it, it makes these electrical charges which create a vortex. Like Bell Rock is one of the most powerful psychic vortexes, right? Cathedral Rock is sort of a yin and yang vortex, male and female. Airport Mesa is also a very good, nice, uplifting vortex, has beautiful views. And there's more vortex areas as well. But out there in this Verde Valley, you can feel the dimensions peeling away when you're walking. The very first time I went with my friend who worked there. She said, oh, I got to just take you out there. And we didn't have a four-wheel drive. So you can only drive in the dirt so far. Then you have to leave your car there and you have to hike in about 40 minutes, right? And as you're walking, it's like a wash that's maybe as wide as your hands or wider, with all kinds of trees and brush. And as you're walking down there, you can just feel dimensions and things opening up. Everything in my body told me to turn around and run home.
Wow.
That's what I was feeling. And when we got there, I was just so uncomfortable, right? And and so I was really happy to get out of there. It's not like we saw anything or whatever. But then years later, a few years ago, I went back with some friends. We actually rented a Jeep and went back there. And we went with one of the local historians as well, who gives night vision binocular, not classes, but, go out and night watch. And she knew a lot of stuff, but I also learned a lot of stuff from my friend who was there. But you can literally see that things are happening there without seeing them. It's like you feel them, you experience them. Now, when Linda was there with her son, if they took the video camera and filmed things, sometimes they were filming into another dimension and they caught things that were not where the camera is. It's really strange. There's even things today where people hold up a piece of glass and they can see a ship in the sky, and they pull it down, they can't see it. It's the same with a cell phone. If you hold a cell phone up, if something's there, you'll see it. But back then they didn't have cell phones. So what they had was a regular camera and a video, the old VHS video camera. So what they caught was, in one thing, they caught a dinosaur, right? Wow. In another time, they caught a creature. And now I forget what that creature looks like, but it's described in Tom's book. The son did when he was driving down that wash that I was telling you about. That's where he saw that creature in the middle of the night. He said it just stopped and stood and looked at him. He looked at it and it went on, right? And another time they filmed telephone poles that weren't there. There were telephone poles and there were pigs. Now, Sedona doesn't have pigs. What they have is javelinas. The javelinas roam wild and come out in the middle of the night, right? So they kind of look like a little boar, right? Like a little boar, but they're not. They didn't have pink pigs, and they're in some of these things. Now, one of the other ones was very fascinating because what they saw was an albino Sasquatch.
I've heard of these, yeah.
Yeah, and a flying saucer above it.
Wow.
And Linda began finding Bigfoot footprints around the corrals. So she knew that there was one in the area. And she would bring out plates of food, vegetables and fruit, and put it on the top of the fence where the corrals were for whoever the Sasquatch was. And in the morning, she found all the food was eaten. It was still there. And then there were sticks and stones, which was Bigfoot gifting back.
Yeah.
And she started finding white hairs on her pregnant mare's stomach. Right? And then she kept feeding her. Every night she fed her, and she realized she was a her because she had laid down in the dirt on her side to make a body imprint to show that she was pregnant.
Wow.
And then so she called her Big Girl, is what she called her. She ended up naming her Big Girl. And they got her on camera with this thing in another dimension, right? So it was really fascinating. Now, Tom Dongo, the UFO researcher there in Sedona, he called her and said, be very aware of your mare's pregnancy because either greys or reptilians are stealing the fetuses of mares on other horse ranches, right?
Wow.
And she believed that Big Girl was protecting pregnant mare from the Greys or reptilians. And we know that they were on that property because they experienced seeing them with their eyes and hearing the reptilians and seeing the reptilian footprints.
Now, do you know, as far as the video and pictures they got, if those like are available for anyone in the audience to go look at?
I totally tried to get that. Linda has passed away. Bob has passed away. The ranch has been dilapidated for a very long time.
Right now is the most critical time for us to take back control of our food supply and become self-reliant by having our very own food forest. Transform your yard into a food forest and create a system of self-reliance that's easy and enjoyable with our friends at Food Forest Abundance. No matter where you're starting from, you can become more self-reliant. You can take your self-reliance to the next level by becoming a producer of your own food through growing and foraging. Learn how to turn your property into an income-producing source of economic self-reliance. If you're ready to go off-grid, click the link in the description and use coupon code FORBIDDEN for discounts on your very own food forest with Food Forest Abundance.
Her son would be the only person that would maybe have them, and nobody seemed to know where he was, what he did. A lot of them, when it was over, except for Linda, they didn't really want anything to do with it anymore, from what I hear from my friend who worked there. It was just too much for a lot of them, and I know the son experienced missing time, and he would go hiking and would experience missing time as well. Now, also on that property, people experience missing time by the windmill, and even some reporters that have gone there over the years, they experienced a couple of hours of missing time there. And and then there is a alligator tree, which I have a picture of in the book, that is between the ranch and the homestead because they're very close together. It's called the alligator tree because its bark looks like alligator skin. And Linda said that was a portal and that negative and positive entities came through there. And she said when the negative ones came through, bad things happened on the ranch all the time. Wow. And when the good ones came through, good things happened. And she really think the good ones were coming through to protect them as well. So that is one fascinating place.
It is. And before we move on from the Bradshaw, wasn't there a supposedly an alien that was captured or killed with like a sword or something like along those lines? I barely remember the exact details of this, but again, we were never able to get any evidence of it or anything. Are you familiar with that?
I am. You're talking about the Stardust Ranch.
Oh, okay. This is a different one. Okay.
That's a different ranch. That's the Stardust Ranch. And John Edmonds passed away earlier this year. So I'm pretty sure that maybe that ranch now has changed hands. So I sent two of my little investigators over to the Stardust Ranch. I did not want to go to that little evil place. I was like, nope, I'm not going there. So two of my associates went, and it's not open to the public because it's private property, but they made a nice hefty donation towards his horse rescue. And so he allowed them to come in and visit with him and sit in the living room. Now, I watched Ghost Adventures when they were there and they did their thing. I had watched that episode and it was kind of, it was pretty scary. It was pretty dark. And I don't have the exact number, but I remember reading in the book that it was something like every 42 days, something like that, is when the aliens would appear through the portal. It was like a cycle where they would come through. And so he knew when they were going to come through, and he said that he had killed several of them, right? And I can't remember the exact amount. Let me see if I've got it.
It's one of those that is so crazy and so out there that, and especially when you can't, if he's killed them, I would think you would, immediately have some proof or hide a body somewhere or, keep it or,
Exactly. So it called into question from a lot of investigators and everyone that he, his ranch was really worth like at most $500,000. It's just property with an old dilapidated house, right? I mean, this house is really old. It hadn't been painted in years. Everything is dark and dingy. And so when all of a sudden this alien thing happened, he put it up on the market. It was either $5 or $6 million, hoping that somebody like a Bigelow or somebody with a lot of money would come and buy it. But everybody said, we're not falling for it because we believe that you're lying, right? But there's not a lot of in-depth stuff but that goes on there that has the proof. But what if it was true? I mean, we don't know. We honestly don't know, because when my two people were there and they were sitting in the living room, they said you have the heebie-jeebies so bad when you're in there that, again, everything's telling you, get off this property, get off this property, get off this property. They said it was so dark, but they said where the fireplace was, it was like the breath and breathing of an evil entity or entities, and that it was horrifically dark, right? So they wanted to really get out, and they said now outside some of the places on the property felt normal, but way in the back of the property it felt also abnormal. It didn't feel right as well. So this is again one of those places that you can't visit unless somebody buys it and opens it up to investigations, right? Or I from what my friends said who were there, there's something dark and evil there for sure, right? Now, the cycling of a portal is an interesting idea, right? We know that when portals are created, usually you can just come and go until some being who has the power to closes it, right? But a cycle portal I had never heard of, and I found that to be interesting. So I can't remember what he said when he decapitated them, they vanished or something like that. But if they were real, I would really think that a body would be there. Right. So
it's a super interesting story, and that's what I love doing on this show, is opening stuff like this up for discussion, because who knows, we don't have the proof either way, so it's a great thing to discuss this stuff to get people little insights into it. Now I want to get into some of your favorite places discussed in the book. Maybe you could name off a few of them.
I will. So I was right. I have my notes right here. Aliens appeared every 42 days, like on a portal timetable. And he had said that since he moved in 1995, he had killed 19 of them.
Wow. That's a lot of aliens to have no bodies.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But see, here's the thing. If I would have seen that first one, I'd have moved.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have stayed there. I would have been out of there and then tried to sell it.
I don't know. I might have been setting traps for him, knowing myself. I might have I had a Home Alone situation for him.
Yeah, well, that's, that is another thing to do, is set up cameras, set up all
Yeah.
kinds of things like that, and then just leave the property and see what happens.
Yeah.
So, so you want to know some of my favorite ones,
Yeah,
or?
some of your favorite spots that you get into in the book.
Well, my favorite of all time, which we already talked a little bit about, is Giant Rock and the Integratron, just because it is some of the most amazing information people will read about, right?
Well, for the audience that may not be familiar, maybe you could give them an overview of what's going on there.
Sure. So after George Van Tassel had that late night meeting with Salganda, he gave him the blueprints to build a rejuvenation machine called the Integratron. And he told him where to build it. It's less than it's about 3 to 5 minutes by car away from Giant Rock. And because there was a large cache of quartz crystal way down beneath in the ground, right? And so George had to raise money to build this machine. And so Howard Hughes gave him 20 grand to start. And so he decided to start having UFO conventions where he would bring contactees in and they would talk to groups. Now, again, back then it was snail mail and phone calling and word of mouth. So as the years went on, it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. I actually have a VHS tape that was taken when it was in its heyday, when there were 10,000 people out at Giant Rock. They all went out with their campers, their cars, their trucks, their whatever, and George would get up. He would talk a little bit about his experience, and then there would be other researchers. There would be people. George Adamski was there, and many others who were these early contactees who were having contact with humans from other worlds that lived on the interior of their worlds, right? So this alone was fascinating, and this helped him to raise the money to build it. And as he got down through the years, it just kept taking lots more and raising and raising and raising, that when he got it to the stage where it was almost 5%, he just had 5% more to go till it would be operational. What you would do is, there's 2 floors, there's a bottom floor and a top floor, is you would walk in one door and walk across the floor and go out the other door, and it would rejuvenate everything, all the cells in your body. And that's how extraterrestrials stay looking young. Salganda was over 700 years old, and he looked like he was 25, right? So when they have their craft, this is what they live in. They live in this actual resonation field that is constantly bombarding their cells with youth, right? That's another reason they live on the interior of planets, is because they can create this same environment where they're not going to be bombarded by the outside influences of the sun and all kinds of things that age us, that they stay looking young as well. Now, they can terrace floors, they can have outdoor settings, they have things called synchrotron skies, where you look up, it's infinite. It looks like you're outside in the middle of the day, and it's called a synchrotron sky because when it turns night, it will turn into night as well and go in the natural cycle of the planet. So So there's all of these very unique things. But when he was almost finished, Salganda told him that Earth people were not ready for it and not to turn it on. So he didn't, and he passed away. And a lot of people believe that, the government came in and took all his research and all of that. We don't really know those things for sure. His second wife has passed away. We don't know about that. And but somebody else ended up buying it. They didn't really do too much with it. It just remained locked up behind gates. And then three sisters came along and they decided to buy it, and they totally gave it a beautiful cleaning and sheen, and redid the property and redid the outside of the dome and the inside of the dome to protect it and preserve it. And so they have so now what they do is they do sound baths, because the top floor of the Integratron is an actual sound chamber. And when you are on one side and I'm on another, if you said Craig on the other side, I would hear Craig that loud, right? So it throws sounds. Once I was there, and Gregorian chanters recorded an album inside the dome. Many artists go and record songs there. And they came in and did a performance for all of us. And it was the most amazing things, because you heard all of these noises and sounds and beautiful chants, like they were moving all around the room in this life like you had never experienced before. So when they do the singing bowls, it's the same thing in a sound bath. When you're lying on a mat, you start to feel like you're levitating. You do feel your cells being rejuvenated. You feel all of these things. It is such a great experience. So if anyone ever wants to go, if you want to learn the history of giant rock, I did give the name of the historian who does take people out on trips to giant rock, right? With and gives them the history. It's better to go at night, where you can bring your chair, sit out, sky watch with binoculars or night vision binoculars, and hear the history of the rock. And if you go to Integratron, you go to integratron.com, and when you're there, you have to sign up for a sound bath. That's the only way that you can get on the property. It's not a place where you can just go and wander around, right? So they have an incredible gift shop. They actually have a CD of the actual sound bath, so you can bring that home and use it to meditate with, which I do. I wore my first one out so much, I got another one the last time I was there. And they also give you a little history before they do the sound bath of it. And there's a lot of the history on the first floor that you can go and look and read about, and all of those things. When I did the short film Stranger at the Pentagon, I went there and we did several screenings of the movie upstairs under the dome, because Dr. Frank Stranges, who wrote the book, who knew Valiant Thor, he actually emceed all of those early space conventions that George Van Tassel gave. So I didn't even know that. They had called me and Dr. Frank to come there to do a retro UFO convention. And we went down. I had always wanted to go. There was my first time, and we were sitting with the sisters under the dome, just me, Dr. Frank, and them talking. And Dr. Frank starts talking about those early times. I had no idea. So I got a big history lesson also from him about those early days and the things that went on there. So that place really, George Van Tassel, we call him the grandfather of ufology, because that's the place where it was born, is that giant rock in the Integratron.
Yeah, man, I love it. Yeah, that's a great history lesson to look up, especially for for ufology. Maybe we could get to a couple of other places. I think we have time.
Absolutely. So let's go to hotspots where you are like almost surely going to see something, right?
Yeah.
So Sedona, you're gonna really see something no matter where you are in Sedona. Just bring those night vision binoculars. If you want somebody to take you out on a tour, it's at the end of the chapter. Just call her, set it up, and go out. It's better to go with somebody for a tour who can tell you all about what's going on, and that they already have the equipment like night vision binoculars in Sedona. The other place is C60 Ranch in Washington State, right? I had heard about this ranch. All my friends had gone there over the years. They're like, oh my God, you see a spaceship every night. Sometimes there's a ton of them, this and that. And so I went with a couple of friends of mine. And so what you have to do is you go on their website and you sign up for to go to a Skywatch, right? If you want to stay on the property, you can rent cabins, yurts, bring your own trailer in, that kind of thing. I mean, there's fees for all of that, of course. It's a huge property. And the Skywatch area looks out into this vast, giant open field that goes on for miles, and at the very end of it sits the majestic Mount Adams, right? So way back when Kenneth Arnold was flying, he saw 9 discs flying in a V formation, and they were going towards Mount Adams from Mount Rainier, right? And this is where the term flying saucer actually originated from. So we know in that area there's been a lot of extraterrestrial activity. Now, the ranch hands and the people on the ranch, they see ships going in and out of the mountain all the time. So when you're in the Skywatch area at night, they do have one set of night vision binoculars. There'll be a ranch person there, and they'll look up and they'll spot one, and they'll use a laser pointer and say, okay, that's where it is. And then they'll say, everyone mentally focus to have it move to the left or move to the right, and you will actually see it move. And when they say power up, it will power up with tons of light, and it'll brighten up like a big bright star. And you hear everybody in the Skywatch area screaming. It's so exciting to see. And when you're looking through the night vision binoculars, you really see it more clearly. You see the definition, and sometimes you will see a fleet of them going by. Sometimes you might see 3. The last time I was in Sedona, I saw 2 of them going, just hauling across the sky, way, way, way up where you can't see with the naked eye, right? So that place, you're going to probably be able to see something. They do have Bigfoots there that sometimes come on the property. There's a juvenile named Delaki that they've named him Delaki, and he seems to be very curious of humans. He doesn't like go into the camps or anything, but you might see him from a distance, and he'll just stay there and look at you, because he's just as curious as the rest of us. So that's a really cool place. There's also, I give you at the end of the thing, all the things that you can rent if you want to stay on the property, or if you like more of the comforts of home, like a toilet, instead of having to leave where you're staying, even in a house, to go to the public restroom on the property, right?
Right.
There's a place not far from there where we stayed, which was absolutely fantastic. And so that's one of my favorite ones. And so those three places like Sedona and Giant Rock, the Integratron, and C60 Ranch, that's really where you're gonna most likely see something. But you have to sort of stay vigilant and keep your eyes to the skies with some night vision binoculars.
I love it, man. This gives people some great options on not only learning about it, but actually being able to go check this stuff out for themselves. So that's very amazing. Now, I want to spend the last few minutes that we have. You're also working on a new documentary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm working on the documentary to the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac. So where a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people knew, is that all of the races in there I took from real contact cases and obtained the permission from the publishers or the actual contactees to use their story in the book. And in the back of the book, under further reading, if you actually go there, you will see the book about that particular race and where you can purchase it, right? So everything's in the back of the book in the ET Almanac in this book, right? So what we're doing is we're actually bringing on a lot of the real people who are having face-to-face contact with extraterrestrial beings. We're bringing them on, talking about what they learned, and you'll hear about their story. We're bringing on hybrids, people who have hybridization with other alien races as well. And we actually will be talking about all the different various types of hybrids, because a lot of people go, hybrids, how can you do that, right? Yeah, well, guess what? There's many ways of doing it. And what's fascinating is that that these people are different. There's something sometimes in the way they look, in the way they act, or they're super smart, or they're super psychic, but all of them have a very deep spiritual connection to the earth and to the universe, right? So that's what's fascinating. It's not going to be your normal UFO documentary. You're going to be in outer space the whole time, right? It's going to be super cool.
I love it, man. Now, how do you feel about the phenomenon? It seems like it's kind of evolving or changing in certain ways. I don't know if what the reason behind this, but a lot of the contactees and experiencers that I've interviewed lately and had on my show, this is more of astral experiences or dream experiences, and they're not really being seemingly not as physical as they used to be with some of these classic encounters that we were just talking about, where they're actually physically taken on a ship, or they can physically see an extraterrestrial and interact with it. And most of the sightings that I see lately are more dream state, astral, etheric, and not as physical as they used to seem. Have you noticed the same thing?
Well, sometimes it depends on who the person is and what the actual mission of that person is as well. And the one thing that you have to remember is that when you're experiencing something in the ethereal or in the astral, right, you are still learning no matter what. It doesn't mean that you have to be in a physical body to learn. It doesn't differentiate from your soul learning if you go to a class on board a craft. Now, lots of people go to classes on board craft. Some are aware of it, some are not aware of it. Some are taken up to give a little awakening. They get a little remembrance. And because they want to keep pursuing it, they remember more and more and more. And they go there. And what this does is this helps them to elevate themselves spiritually, like the consciousness raising programs we talked about earlier in the show, that this helps them to broaden their their spiritual sustenance, so that they become more and more spiritual. They now work from the heart and mind working together. And then this sort of bleeds out into all their family and friends. What are you doing different, and this and that, and that kind of thing. And if people want to then sort of say, well, wow, I think I might try that. I had an experience once. Or, I will tell you, there are so many people that have had experiences. And once they know that you've had one, they feel so much at ease to tell you about their experiences. I ask actors all the time. That's what I do as a casting director. And I will tell you, some of them had horrifying experiences. Some of them have had brilliantly beautiful experiences. Some of them want nothing to do with it, right? Because they're too terrified of what's out there in the great big universe. But my question always is, if benevolent extraterrestrials landed, would you go for a ride in their spaceship? Right? Almost everybody says yes, but that last, 15% says no.
Yeah. Well, to me, I do see that there is a huge aspect of this that seems to be a spiritual evolution for humans, where they're trying to evolve our consciousness. But very few times, or less often, we see nefarious types of experiences where they're dealing with, more malevolent extraterrestrials that seemingly are having terrifying experiences and might not have the best interest of humans in mind. Do you think that there's this kind of, I don't want to say war, or something going on where there's these different factions of good and evil extraterrestrials that have different ideas of what they want out of humanity, that has been going on for a while?
Well, there's so many different points of view that go along with it. But just like on our planet, we have good, bad, and then evil. There's just some people are just plain evil, and they don't care about killing. They don't care. They'll just do whatever they want to get what they want. There are some extraterrestrial races that, for instance, Bill Tompkins, who worked at TRW and worked on the first moon mission, said that he was able to see the feed when it was going in, and the actual live feed picture, and that Neil Armstrong saw these gigantic reptilian ships on the moon. And so Bill also believed, and I'm just giving you a little tiny thumbnail of it, there's way more to it than what I'm saying, but if people are interested, Bill Tompkins has passed away, but he did write a book about it. So if you look up Bill Tompkins, you'll find his book, I'm sure, on Amazon or something. But one of the things that he says, you think that's your moon? That's not your moon. That's their moon. The reptilians, they own the galaxy. Now, we've heard this from other people as well. From other contactees who were meeting with positive extraterrestrial races that told them about this ongoing war with humans and reptilians and things like that. That doesn't mean every reptilian is bad. That doesn't mean all of that is, but in the end, we don't have access to really what's going on out there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear these stories and do them, but what I don't want people to do is go into fear about it. Stay in your positive spiritual self, and you are the one who's helping to rise this planet out of duality, each person just focusing on that. Don't dwell on these darker aspects, because there's nothing that you can do about them anyway, right? So keep yourself positive, keep yourself spiritual, and keep going and elevating yourself, your spiritual sustenance, and you'll be fine, because nothing can get around you when you've raised yourself.
Wow. I agree, man. That's a perfect note to close on. Craig, thank you so much. This book is fantastic. Let the people know where they can find more about yourself, get the book, social media, all your good stuff.
Sure. Anything Stranger at the Pentagon, and you can watch the short film I did. We won a bunch of awards on the website, strangeratthepentagon.com, or you can watch a short film on Amazon Prime in the UK and America. If you'd like to get these books, you can go to my website, Autobiography of /other-books, or you just go to autobiographyofet.com and you click on other books. My book series is on the front homepage, and then the other books are under other books, of course. And anything you buy off the website, I personalize and sign them for you and all that good stuff. So that's where everybody can get all the goodies that are out there.
Awesome. Well, Craig, I love it. Thank you so much, and we're definitely going to do it again in the future.
You betcha. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.